Yeah, you can't pause.
Hmm?
Good evening, family. This is Antoine signing in, aka Lieutenant Louis 1979. And this is a response video to that was done by Candid Conversation, Season 3, Episode 6, Black British versus African Americans. And what I've assembled is a round table consisting mostly of family. I have my sister and two of my cousins to give their thesis on the Black British versus African American contrast and comparison. And then immediately following that, we're going to participate in a discussion in which we can question and challenge each other. We aren't here to argue. We don't intend to go back and forth with Black British people that we've never met, i.e., it's all love. We're going to develop the conversation further. So I'll just give a little bit of my background. I'm currently living in Canada. I've lived in Korea, Germany. I've hit 5 of the 7 continents. I've traveled to Ghana, West Africa, Colombia and Brazil in South America, PR and DR in the Caribbean, Philippines, Thailand, China, Japan, and Asia. I just returned from a trip to London and Paris in Europe, where I had plenty of time to break bread with my Black British brothers and sisters, and it was all love. Everything was good. I spent time in Ronnie Scott's. I did a Black British tour, a history tour in the British Museum. So I get it. Um, Again, I'm not bragging about myself, and it's not all about me. I just want you to know that not every African American that you're gonna run across is ignorant to geography. As a matter of fact, geography is probably some of our favorite subjects. Talking about the people at the round table. So that's me. I'll go ahead and I'll introduce my sister,
Okay.
Antoinette.
How you
We
doing?
got Dr. David Anderson, and we have the esoteric coder, Jeremy.
Yes.
Esoteric. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Who's next? Who's first?
You.
Okay.
Me?
A little bit about myself. My
Hold on
name
one
is.
Okay.
second, Antoinette. Hold on one second. Go ahead, Jeremy.
You were talking to Adam.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Jeremy. I have also had the luxury of traveling outside of this country that we live in, and I've seen some things. I've met with some interesting people. So I have a bit of a, I feel like I have a bit of a worldly view in terms of just different cultures in general, cultures, ideologies, philosophies, just the whole nine. But yes, I'm excited. I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah.
We have Dr. Anderson. We lost your feed. There he is.
Hey, what's going on?
That's it?
Hey, what's going on, folks? I'm a Christian. Unfortunately, I will, but
Hey, Dave, your feed is bad.
and I hope because time. Can you hear me better now?
Nah, you went out for a little while. Go ahead, start over.
All right, yeah, I was just saying I'm not as well traveled as my dear cousin Antoine, but I've been to a few places. I've been to Bermuda, which of course is UK territory, and I've been able to spend some time with some British blacks, I guess quote unquote British blacks there. I also spent a little bit of time in Garmisch in Munich in Germany, and I came in contact with some black Germans. So and of course, I've had a lot of experience with first and second generation Africans here in the States, in professional school or even in undergrad. So hopefully I can go off of kind of my personal experience and also kind of what I've extracted from reading and from listening to videos and add something productive to this conversation about African Americans versus British blacks.
All right. Antoinette, you're on.
All
Oh, we
right.
saved the best
So
for last.
Yeah, thank you so much, big bro. So a little bit about myself. I'm clearly African American. Came up in an area called Matson. It is actually an area that's snug in between two areas that have recently the claims as being the best black neighborhoods, uh, uh, yeah, best black neighborhoods in the area. So, um, and they're usually the only ones that are mentioned. Olympia Fields and Country Club Hills are usually the only ones mentioned as far as black neighborhoods go. But Matson's like smack dab in the middle, and it's actually been pretty sweet for a long time. Also, I guess my experience or the reason I'm interested in this conversation is that I'm a farmer. So a lot of people would consider that experience to be unique. I actually grow vegetables in an urban setting to sell at market. Um, and I do that for passion in regards to making sure that people are eating healthy and people are treating their bodies right. So my interests have usually been more focused on the United States, although I have traveled a little bit and met Africans over in South Korea when I traveled there for the military. So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you so much for inviting me to the conversation, guys.
All right. All right. So that's your panel, and that's some of our experiences and some of the contact that we've had with the brothers and sisters abroad. But now we want to get into brass tacks. We want to talk about the comparison of the two, Black British and African American. So what I'll do is I'll go to each of you and speaking specifically on that relationship, how it contrasts, how the Black British culture contrasts with the African American culture. If you can just share your thesis of what you think, and what we'll do, we'll give each of you 4 minutes, up to 4 minutes, to go ahead and just say what you want to say. We'll start with the lady first.
Oh, okay. So my thesis statement would have to be um, that well, there were so many things in the video that I wanted to discuss, but if I had to say overall, I'd say that there's such a divide. And the video, what the video did for me was it amplified or it highlighted areas where that divide exists between what the actual African American experience is and what part of that experience is making it overseas. Also, there's a huge divide in the other direction, and I think that, my thesis statement is that they're showing enough interest to us that it's time for us to kind of unify and get our African history straight. Because a lot of us are out here blind, and it's not intentionally. The use of the word ignorant was prevalent throughout the video. I'm like, wow, that's something that needs to be fixed. Is
Okay.
that I didn't have a one line thesis. I'm sorry.
That's good. No, that's awesome. Dr. Anderson.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of talk about African Americans versus British blacks. Honestly, I think there's a lot of commonality between the two, more than we give credit to. I think a lot of what we experience um, is similar as well. And maybe if we can connect on those commonalities, that will kind of aid us in unifying as one. Yes, the African American history here in our country, or the Black experience, is unique in itself intrinsically. But again, I think there's just a lot that we have in common, and I think it's also extremely important that we dispel some of the myths or some of the false stereotypes that's kind of propagated in the media that unfortunately some Black British take hold to and make them. I mean, obviously, with stereotypes, there's a certain percentage of truth, but I think that those stereotypes are overblown, and some of our Black British partners lies and think that all blacks meet those. But yeah, again, I just think that we should layer gap when it comes to essentially furthering the overall black agenda in this world.
We got the gist of. We missed parts of what you were saying
Ah,
because of the signal, but we did get the gist of what you were saying. Where you're
yeah,
saying that the negative stereotype is kind of propagated throughout the media that everybody seems to cling on to so much, the mainstream media for the most part, and that goes abroad and it's kind of taken hold of by everybody, by Arabian people, by Africans, by Europeans. They have this monolithic view of African Americans and they think that we're ignorant for the most part, where there is a portion of our population that is that way, but then there's also a much larger portion that's doing just fine and we're okay. So
absolutely. Yeah, I think the media creates, unfortunately, this false reality of who we are as African Americans, and I think there's a certain percentage of British blacks who understand that. But yeah, hopefully in this conversation we can clear up some of those false ideas about who we are as a people here in Africa, America, African here in America. Excuse me.
most definitely. Esoteric.
Okay, so I just want to start off by saying I absolutely love how Black British people sound when they speak. Like it is the most amazing thing to me to hear them talk. Like when they open their mouths, it's like music. You know, and I think that, you know, and I like what both David and Antoinette touched on, you know, in terms of the divide. I believe that a lot of the problems that we face, both here and over there, you know, with regards to one another, is we just really don't know each other. You know, if all we do is accept the portrayals of one another from what's being pushed and basically forced on us through the media, then I mean, how can you? I mean, I understand why we feel the way that we feel, you know, and that goes for both sides, you know, and I really like the fact that we're able to come together on this platform and try to dispel some of this stuff because, like Antoinette said, I think that we're more alike than we give each other credit for. You know, I really believe that. I think that we try to see our differences, and I think we should spend more time seeing our similarities. I really believe that that's going to be pivotal um, if we have any sort of hopes to go anywhere. You know, I really believe we need to focus more on coming together.
Okay. I agree with you wholly. Let me get my desk back. I agree with you entirely. I think that we're not the same people. All right. So I think we're just as much alike with Black British people as we would be with British people, the same percentage. I would probably argue and say we're more like Americans and they're more like British people, and we're all less like Africans. You get it? And we need each other. Black Americans, African Americans need Black British people, and Black British people need Africans. They should not try to have a Black British culture. Now, that sounds strange because they have their team there, just like you know whatever soccer they watch soccer. I think it's Manchester United, whatever. They can cheer for Manchester United. We're all from Chicago. We can cheer for the Chicago Bulls. But at the end of the day, that's not Africa. We're not talking about an NBA team in Africa. We're not talking about a soccer team in Africa. And we need each other. And I say that because most of us, you know, African American history, African American culture was born out of necessity. We can't go home. We can't go home without a bridge. Africans do not understand African Americans. British blacks or Black British, they understand African Americans to an extent. They are our bridge home. Or Nigerians that live in America, Ethiopians that live in America, they are our bridge home. Most of those Black British people that were in that circle, They were either one from the Caribbean. If they're from the Caribbean, they have a very similar history to our own. Okay, so I'm not really talking
Same
about
thing.
them.
That's what you mean, right?
I'm talking about the Africans. Their parents are from Nigeria, and they were born in Britain. All right, they know who they are. They know that they're Nigerian. They know that they're Ghanaian. They know that they're Kenyan. They can
And I
go
can
home.
see that.
They may not be, hold up one second, because I'm still on my thesis. They may not be welcome when they come home. Maybe they get the Westerner price when they try to buy things in the market, but they know their history. Our history was born out of necessity. And the American experience is unique, whereas Europe is the motherland. You have to understand that Europe, Britain, is the motherland for Anglo-Saxons, not for Africans. America is a unique experience. America is Europeans going to America and mixing with native people there after they stopped along the way and picked up Africans that did not want to go there. And you had all three of those cultures come together and mix and make something new. What's happening right now is you have, and people have the right to live wherever they want to in the world. So I'm not saying that they can't go someplace and be something else. If right now I'm in Canada, I'm going to get Canadian citizenship. I stay here 3 years. I'll naturalize. I'll be Canadian. But that's not, I'm not culturally Canadian. You see what I'm saying? At the end of the day, my thesis is that we can't help each other. I'm not going to be able to help you, my beautiful black British sister and brother, as an African American. And you're not going to be able to help me as a black British person because you don't have anything to give me and I don't have anything to give you. But if we can get to the root and help our people at home and they can help us, then we can all help each other. I'm not trying to stay an African American forever. I don't want us to be African Americans unless we're going to take this shit over. But I'm not trying to take over Europe because that's theirs. Their history is there. And I get it. You know, the world is changing. It's all interconnected. I love all people. I love white people. I love black people. I love Chinese people. I love to travel. But there's nothing like going home. That's my thesis. I probably ran a little bit over 4 minutes, but now let's have a discussion.
That's very good. Very good. Real quick, I just wanted to say, and you cleared it up yourself when you said it. But you said that some of the African Black Brits are more like British people than like Africans, and I would hope that that's not true because I know some of them are first generation, and you mentioned that later on, and I would hope that that meant that they got to be more like our Mexican Americans or our Arab Americans, where they still know their culture and they still have their history in their hand. It's not, like ours. I would consider Black Brits like the ones you're talking about, Black British people whose ancestry dates back to their slavery, or, I guess if you get several generations deep, you become Americanized like our Mexican Americans and our Arab Americans tend to do. But I don't know. Did that stand out to anybody else?
No, yeah, I totally agree with that, especially the last part of what you said. I think it's extremely important to make a clear distinction between our experience here in America and British blacks. Like a lot of them are first and second generation Africans that have migrated, or third generation Africans that have migrated to Great Britain. Our experience here in America is unique, obviously, because we were brought over here unwillingly and forced into free labor or slavery. And I think that is an important distinction to make. Now, although our history is slightly different, I do believe that we share a lot of the same injustice. When I was out in Bermuda, I had the opportunity to speak with one of the Bermudians there, And again, Bermuda obviously is a territory of the UK, so the British culture is heavy in Bermuda. And he was just sharing with me, not only in Bermuda, but back in the UK, they face some of the same prejudices and discriminatory actions he said we face here in America. And I think maybe that's one thing that can unite us and tie us together. And the question before we fight again and a big can answer for over with fight and a resource. I think that'd be extremely helpful. Like right now, African Americans, we essentially outside of the American man, you know, don't have anyone to rely on. There's definitely an identity crisis with African Americans. But if we were able to form a bond with our British black brothers, with our first and second generation African brothers and sisters who are over here in America, I mean, I think that would mean a lot. I know I kind of was a little tangential there, but yeah.
That's great. Okay, so can I ask one question too about like the whole video? And there was several times when one of them kept saying that they grew up wanting to be black. And I heard Trevor Noah make the same reference. He had a whole stand-up about it, about growing up wanting to be black. And it kind of blows my mind because I'm wondering what parts do you think that they were talking about that they wanted from our culture? Because, you know, we are, as African Americans, we do tend to be, you know, more negative on ourselves. And we know that they're getting out about the shootings and the racism that we're suffering. They're hearing about hip hop, and we're not all proud of what's coming out in hip hop. Some of us are like, you know, those things shouldn't be said or done on the radio.
Right, we aren't all proud about the things that are coming out in hip hop because we don't manage what's really going out into the airwaves. That's not managed by us. Hold up one second. We're gonna bring you in. I'm gonna put you on mute for a second. You got some music in the background. We got my brother just popped in. I'm just gonna use his mic so we don't hear the music. We're gonna bring you in just a minute. We'll hear this. You know, we'll see a certain image going out that we don't have any control over, and some of it's good and some of it's bad. And it's all somebody mentioned it in their video also. Just how large that media conglomerate is that goes out over the airwaves, and they really can't control what's coming in their tubes, what they get off of television. So they're bombarded with images of African Americans. Then they broke into this conversation about stealing movie position. Nobody cares about that because at the end of the day, you know, I like Idris Elba, whoever else, and that's not us even choosing because we don't own that industry. We don't own Hollywood. Now you have Nollywood. So Nollywood is supposed to be this the third largest, the second largest movie production cinemas, and you know they put out more movies than everybody except for Bollywood. So they have control, and we can tune into that. Now they can put our image out in a different way, but they won't because when they come here, they're told to stay away from us, which is horrible, but at the same time it's necessary because there's a lot of bullshit in our culture because that culture is reflected back down on us from mass media. We're not a real culture, it's a subculture. But everybody wants to be us or wants to be a part of it because it's just so large. And it's fly. At the end of the day, we move fly. We move differently. We move different than the average white American. We dance better. We might sound a little better. And we got swagger, right? Like all black people across the world all have swag, always colorful, always dressed. So they want to be a part of that because they have that same swagger in their heart and they want to display that. That's the portion that they want. And then what they don't want is they don't want our station right. They don't want to be separated from the motherland the way that we've been separated from the motherland. They don't want to be confused the way that we've been confused. They don't want to be diluted the way that we've been diluted.
Yeah. I mean, I think the black culture here in America is very attractive when it comes to entertainment. I think that's what they're speaking on. You know, it's glorified in our media as well, and it's something that they want to be a part of. And Yeah, there are some negative elements to it, but also I think our culture is kind of a creation or a kind of projection of our experience here in America, and I think that that's appealing as well. I think it is, and I think like some British blacks, or Trevor Noah, he gave you gave that example. I think somehow they want to know how it feels to be a Black American. So yeah, that's what I think they're attracted to. Our like you were saying, Antoine, our swag. We're very ostentatious. All of that is attractive, but they do, and not to demonize our culture, but again, there are some negative elements, and I do think that they do separate the positives from the negatives, and they don't want to take on the negative parts of our culture.
Yeah. Let me introduce Rodney real quick. Hold on one second, Rodney.
All right.
We can hear you. You can just introduce yourself and what do you think about the video?
I'm Rodney Lewis. I am Antoine's brother, cousins to Antoinette's brother as well, and cousins to everybody else in the call, looks like. I'm an MBA, ITIL, PMP, software consultant, veteran, all that stuff. Uh, I watched the video, and what I thought was, like you said, they are very, I'm not going to say ignorant, but they don't know the whole story, right? And they're not supposed to, because our story came, is a little more different. They're going to get the entertainment. They're not going to get the real deal of what we are, who we are. You can't get that unless you understand slavery and you understand kind of what it did to us as a people. And that's not something that the world as a whole really understands. I've watched some videos where they've said things like, why do we keep complaining about it? Why is it an issue? Why, we other cultures have had bad things happen too, which, yeah, I can see that point of view. But at the same time, sorry guys, we're leaving this party, so I'm driving, about to start driving. I'll just say it's one piece. Even though they don't see the whole picture, eventually they're gonna have to, as our, set this up 1 second.
Well, yeah, okay. While you're doing that, Ronnie, we'll go to Jeremy.
Okay, yeah. Just this last thing, because I might have to cut off in a minute again too. I'm about to drive. But as our culture grows and evolves with this new IT and everything that's happening in the world, there's a lot of technology. The world's getting smaller basically, so everybody knows everybody. We're going to be more involved with other cultures, whether they want to or not, just because of the fact that they're coming here and we're going overseas working, and it's going to be more mixed. So they're going to get the real deal eventually as they start to meet us individually. And basically, that's the best way to get it out there. They've got to meet people, kind of like when dealing with racism in the U.S. You can show pictures of, black people through slavery and show pictures of white people and different things like that. But once we meet each other, that's when the real deal happens. When people actually get to know people by working with them, by living with them, and integrating with them.
Right on. All right. You dropping off now? You're going to hold on for a second?
I'll hold on for a second, but.
All right. Jeremy. Esoteric. Go ahead, chime in.
Yes. All right. So I feel, I agree with a lot of what was said. One thing that I like to there's this phrase, I guess a quote about people, and I'm just paraphrasing, about people forgetting history, being doomed to repeat it. And while it's not a shared history, it is an example that can be learned from. And I feel like it's history nonetheless. So I feel like if we aren't made more aware of each other's situations, whether it's past, present, or future, as what was mentioned with regards to technology, because technology is, it's literally changing the world. Like, it already has changed the world. And I read a book by Peter Thiel called 0 to 1, and it talks about like how technology is evolving in such a way where you can have one computer, and then you can make more computers, and then you're basically moving from one to in some infinite number of possibilities of what you can do with a computer. But if you think about that very first computer that was created, when you were taking something that didn't exist and you were bringing it to life, that's when you're going from 0 to 1. So now you're manifesting this new existence, and I feel like we're doing this all throughout society, all over the world. And I feel like with us not being so involved in ownership of a lot of technology, we arrive in situations like we're facing now, where you have the media painting a narrative and people that don't interact with people. You have people like Rodney mentioned integration. And I look at integration of, us integrating with the Black Britons. And if we don't have that integration and, the integration with Africans, and like if that is a disconnect, then how will we evolve? And I think that's really disturbing. If we're sitting here fighting about who got what movie role, I think like
It's like
you
it's a
mentioned when
fake it's a fake argument. It's almost to the fact where you start looking at I look at them like memes. Like we're supposed to hate each other. Like they're supposed to be like even the title of the video. It's no diss on them, but the title of the video was versus like Africans versus Caribbean, or light skin versus dark skin, Nigerians versus Igbos versus, and it's to the point where I used to date an African girl, and I was living with her family for about 6 months in Philadelphia, and they would get to talking shit about African Americans. Now we're in African American land. We're in Philadelphia, surrounded by, and it's the hood, right? So it's like the South Side, it's North Philly. It's dirty, you know what I'm saying? It's gangbangers, but they would talk. That's all that they can afford coming here. So that's where they're living, and then they had these ideas about African Americans. They would talk shit about African Americans, and then they would talk shit about African Americans talking shit about them. All the while, they love me. They love my black ass, because they knew I was intelligent. They knew I was well spoken. They knew I had a good heart. So they would get to talk shit about African Americans and stop like, well, look, he's in the room. And they're like, oh, he's African. Like it's all love. Once you know somebody personally, it's all love. But when you have these ideas, like, we may have grown up with these ideas about the African booty scratcher, or, all Africans look the same. All Africans are so dark and have these big noses and big lips. And sometimes they do. And sometimes that's beautiful. But not all Africans look like that, right? Like a lot of Africans are fair complected. A lot of Africans have my phenotype. So it's a big continent. It's a big place. And it's a really complicated history. It's not just as simple as white people coming to Africa and stealing black people and then going back into Africa and colonizing everything, right? And I think if we're ever going to get like down to brass tacks and really start solving our issues, one, it's going to happen person to person. Like we have to be able to talk to each other. Black British people have to be willing to talk to African Americans, and they are. I was just in Britain, and it was all love.
And that's why I think that's really important what Antoinette was saying when she had talked about like how they would commonly say things like they want to be black. And I think that comes from how we're portrayed like throughout society. Like you look at, a corporation like the NFL, for example, they brought in like $14 billion in 2017. And a lot of that was from African American talent that was able to generate that kind of revenue. Because if all the African, they talk about kneeling for the national anthem. I mean, like, I've got a different opinion on that. But anyway, I think what if all African Americans decided to withdraw from the NFL? Like, would anybody even watch it? I mean, if you take away the talent, you take away the engine that drives that force. I mean, it's not interesting anymore, And I feel like they're seeing that culture, whether it's in the NFL, whether it's music, whether it's NBA, whether they're just seeing all these different aspects, and it's like they can glorify it, and you know, to an extent we glorify it. That's why you see so many music videos where people want to, you know, have the latest and greatest of everything, because you know it's a way to kind of like show off what you have in a world where you may not have had anything until you got to that point, like material. And so now you want to go and show it off and you want to go and buy it, but then you end up broke, you know, because
You ever heard of the Congo dandy? Have you ever heard of the
what's
Congo
that?
dandies? Look up this video on YouTube, everybody. When you get done with this, with the Congo dandies, and it's this Congolese gentleman who spend their entire paycheck buying clothes, and he live in a mud shack.
You told me
That's
that.
not blood. There's certain things that it's in an African's blood, where an African knows an African, no matter where he's at in the world. We like to dance when we're broke, right? We like to party when we can't pay our bills, and that's something that is shared across the African diaspora. Is something that's shared on the African continent.
That's everybody though. That's all races.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty ubiquitous. That's universal, and it was something you were pointing at, Antoine. I think a lot of the misconceptions out there can be dispelled if we just learn how to openly communicate with, first and second, with individuals from Africa and with our British, our Black British brothers and sisters. I can definitely draw from my own personal experience. I know when I was in undergrad and even medical school, there were some of my colleagues who were first and second generation Africans, and they had certain preconceived notions about Black Americans. But when they had the opportunity to meet me and some of my other African American classmates, they soon realized that a lot of those stereotypes weren't true, and they weren't generalizable. They can't be generalized. So I think if we just have that open line of communication, if we have podcasts and conversations like this, I think it would do a great deal of unifying us. So I think that's extremely crucial to the relationship between us and Africans and British Blacks.
Right on, right on. So let me ask you guys all this question. I'll start with you, Antoinette. And is there anything about the Black British culture that you've seen, other than Idris Elba, that you think is fine, that you really like? Can't hear you. You're muted. You've been muted.
From my perspective,
Hold on one second.
honestly, I don't know a lot about the Black British culture.
Right.
I guess most of them came there because they colonized there. I don't think they had a slavery thing going on in Britain, so I can't say I know a lot about them. I just know they have nice accents. The girls have really cute accents. I like hearing them. That's all I know.
Right. All I was gonna say is I've only ever met one Black Brit. Interesting person. It was kind of like that experience that most of us have when you meet a type of person for the first time, where you start talking about the differences and the things you didn't know. And he was informing me about urban areas and what their urban areas were like, because he felt like, not that he had something to prove, but he wanted to explain something to me so that I could get a better picture of who he was, and not think of him as a Black male Mary Poppins. This because British people, I think their accent, it sounds sweet to us. It sounds so educated and smart. And he's like, nah, bruh, it's not all like that, isn't it? And it's like, oh, okay. I like how you sound, but tell me more. That's basically like, yeah. So I would like to know a lot more about them. I think they got more Idris Elbas that they ain't telling us about, honestly.
Hey, does everybody seem to think that they have good etiquette? Like, I always think when I hear a British person, like a Black Brit, I think they have perfect etiquette. Like, they know how to use all the forks and knives and everything. Like, they were brought up like that. I don't know if it's true, but
I can tell you from when I went there, they don't all have perfect etiquette. And it's like we can't, because all of their accents sound educated to us, but there's this, one of their accents is like the hood accent. Like there's a white British hood accent that they can distinctly hear the differences from somebody who is like upper class or posh, as they would call it, right? So it's funny because I heard going there, not only do you hear all the different accents from people who immigrated there, because it's a very diverse, London's very, very diverse. But then when it comes to the people who speak with a British accent, there's slight different tonages. And if you hear somebody speak from what is like the northern part of England, I forgot what it's called, but Scottish, you won't understand a single. It's like hearing somebody talk from the fucking bayou. You're not gonna understand a word that comes out of their mouth, right? So it's very funny. It's just so many different accents. Irish and Scottish are a little bit closer to English. I had a hard time at one point telling the difference between Australian accent versus a South African accent versus an English accent, and they're all different. But I will tell you the thing that I saw that I loved was one, the same way, you know, mom and dad would get up and they get on the metro train and they ride downtown and they go to work in a business suit, right? You see that en masse in Britain, the same way you would see it en masse in America. The same way I saw it en masse in Brazil. And you wouldn't expect to see that because everything you see coming out of Brazil is all about the favelas. But there's a sizable black middle class in Brazil. And they look just like you. They look just like me. And they get up and they get on their trains and they go to work. And I think once you see that in a different setting, when you're able to go there and see the Sugarloaf Mountain and see the beaches in the Atlantic Ocean and still see black people that deal with racism, that are getting up and they're going to work every day and they're middle class, it grows your thought pattern, but at the same time, it makes the world seem so much more like it's so much smaller. You have brothers and sisters in Brazil and Colombia, in South Africa. And I think when it comes to South Africa, I think South Africa has more of an idea of what African Americans have been through than anybody else on the continent by far.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, their apartheid is synonymous to kind of the Jim Crow era that we went through. So I think they could definitely relate a little bit. They could relate better to us. But Rodney kind of brought this up a little bit. On the video, one of the black British guys stated that it's time for us to get over slavery. And I'm curious if a lot of black British individuals have that same thought. And if so, I think, this podcast would be a great opportunity for us to kind of elaborate a little bit more on the black experience, on what we've gone through from slavery to Jim Crow to mass incarceration to the systemic racism that still exists. The fact that we do recognize the importance of us coming together, unifying here in the States, and intrinsically creating the change that we need, but at the same time recognizing the importance to continue to fight against some of this systemic racism that we experience. Like, I think we should really elaborate on that, because that was a little concerning to me. That was alarming to me that he kind of made that blanket statement. I don't know. What do you all think?
Definitely. Not on this actual podcast. It'll take a long time to unpack all that, but definitely something we need to talk about. Because the whole world is not just that guy or black Brits. The whole world, because it's a global country now, doesn't really fully understand what we're still dealing with and kind of what's the ramifications of going through slavery generationally and losing all your background, all your history. I mean, they think, oh, well, you are who you are, fine. You just deal with it. But there's a lot that builds up. There's a lot of wealth that was given freely that's in the wrong hands right now because of the way this world has basically happened. So yeah, there's something we definitely need to unpack.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So go ahead. I was going to say, Rodney, right before you go, Jeremy, that the same thing happened in Britain. So a lot of the wealth that's built up in Europe also came directly from colonization, right? So they can understand that portion. I think they more quickly get over colonization because the reason they're over it is because you had different classes of Africans, and you have a lot of Africans the same way there's ignorant African Americans. poor African Americans, a lot of times that poverty and that ignorance goes hand in hand. Are you telling me that 40% of Africa is not in poverty and we don't have ignorant Africans? And then you have the cream of the crop, or you have the political class, or you have the business class, or you have the class that immigrated from Africa, the sending remittances back to Africa, but still that talented tenth. And I think, I don't know if we mentioned this before, but we're talking of, a talented tenth or whatever else that is in forms of conglomerate in Europe, right? Or you have a nice population that's very, well spoken, educated, whatever else in Europe. Then we still have impoverished people back in Africa that may never. And let's put it like this: if you look at any group of people, a certain percentage of those people are going to be higher class. So a certain percentage of African Americans are higher class, and a certain percentage.
A very small percentage.
Right. And then you look at white people, a certain percentage are high class, and you have this very big population that's middle class, and then you have a bigger population that's survived because their higher class brothers and sisters are somewhat going to make sure that they're okay.
Yeah, because I even look at some of the disparities within the middle class when you look at blacks and whites, right? There's clear disparities. As Rodney was kind of pointing out, we were economically castrated. We essentially gave them free labor through slavery, right? And we never received reparations. And I don't think we'll ever receive reparations. But I think what we're hoping for is for them to open up at least more economic opportunities. And I know there's a personal responsibility within our community that goes along with that. But what I don't want is for British blacks to think that we've just we've arrived, because that's not the situation here currently for us in America. It's just not. And I know they may hear about a lot of individual success stories, or Beyonce or this entertainer or this individual who's made a lot of money, but that is not representative of the collective. It's not. And I think it's just extremely important that we make that clear, that there's still a lot of work that we have to do. And like Rodney was saying, we're still feeling the reverberations or the ramifications of slavery, whether that's just the truth. And that's why, and we can't disassociate from that history, because we're still dealing with the ramifications, of it. We're still dealing with the same systemic oppression. It's just evolved over time. And
let me pose another question, Dave. And this will be the last question, and then we'll wrap up after this. But if I can get a response from everybody, and what's the benefit? Because I believe it's a big benefit to thinking like an immigrant, or there's some thought patterns that Africans have that maybe we need to adopt. So if you have one, or if you don't have one, then say why you don't have one, or why you disagree with that statement. But
man,
you're excited, but you got.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, hey, let me click off. Hold up 1 second.
And I'll shut up.
Oh, go ahead, man. You're frozen again. Damn. Dave,
yeah. Hey, man.
You gotta repeat yourself.
Can you hear me?
We hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. One I guess thing that immigrants have that I think we should really take hold of and incorporate in our community is exactly that sense of community and unity. Like I am baffled by the fact that there are so many companies and businesses within our community that aren't black owned, that don't offer us the job opportunities that we need, and we simply allow that to happen. That is absurd to me. A sense of community would mean we put our monies together, right? And we create the businesses to produce the products that we need to survive, to thrive, and for conveniences and things of that nature. We should create our own market, our own economy. Like that is, I think that's crucial. When I think about, Somalians up in Minnesota, when I think about, Indians, when I think about Chinese and how they come together and they recognize the importance of community and unity and they use that to their advantage, that's an aspect of their community that I think we definitely need to include in ours. And it can be done. I think a lot of times we feel disenchanted or we feel as if it's too difficult. We can't do it. But we can. We just need to unify. And that's the question I have. How do we become more unified as a community? And I think once we become more unified here in our country, once we better ourselves and continue to fight for equality when it comes to the systems we have in this country, I think we'll be better prepared to partner with our Black British brothers and our African brothers and sisters. But yeah, that's one aspect of immigrants that I really like, and I think we should include.
Can I go next?
Go ahead.
I think kind of what Dave was talking about, but the financial discipline is something that if we think like an immigrant, we'll definitely get a hold of. You look at immigrants, and I've known several that I've talked to about finances specifically, but they're not out trying to impress everybody else with what they're wearing and being ballers and everything like that. There was this one guy I talked to, he's brand, and we were talking about because he wore nice, and I was like, man, how can you afford that? You're in the Army just like me. He's like, man, I don't buy anything that's not an asset. He said, I don't buy anything unless I know I can get my money back. He said, I only drive Mercedes-Benz because I know they hold their value. Like, the way they think is totally different. Then when they come into this country, like you said with the unity, they come together, and what do? They look and see what we need, and they say, oh yeah, these people, they're always buying stuff from a gas station. Here, I'll open up a gas station. I'll open up a convenience store. And people are gonna come buy it. There was a guy when I was getting my MBA, he was in the class with me. He was going for his MBA too, but he owned a vape store. He owned several vape stores, and he was like, man, I opened the stores up and I've been doing this. They come in with a business mindset, a financial mindset, and they've got the discipline to go ahead and follow through with it. That's what we need. We need that type of financial discipline. We all make money. Matter of fact, we all make pretty good money. We're not, our family, we don't have a lot of people who are just like scrubs, right? We're all making pretty decent money. We have to do the right thing with that money. We have to get rid of this debt. A lot of these immigrants that we deal with, that we're talking to, they don't keep that like that. They just don't. Sometimes they can't even get a credit card because, coming from another country, whatever, but they don't believe in debt. Right. In our country, we're taught, hey, you get up, you get this credit card, now you can buy something, you can get it right now. You can pay for it later. And then, oh yeah, you're gonna get a paycheck every month. Right. Oh, you're gonna pay your bill every month, you pay your bill back, but you get another credit card. You want a new TV? Yeah, you get no credit. I mean, no interest for like 6 months. That financial discipline is the key. If we think like an immigrant, that's the number one thing we gotta pull from them. All right. That's all I was gonna say. I'm gonna go ahead and close my mouth.
No, you good, bro.
That was good.
I just want to get that question to Jeremy and then get his answer on that, because it was really more meant for like black British people, and not saying all black British people are immigrants, but immigrants, we'll keep this on the same train of thought as far as immigrant things that you like about them or things that we can take from them. Jeremy.
For me, I would think a little bit differently than immigrant. I would think culture. There's one culture that I really like. I feel like I've taken a lot mentally from this culture. Just how I've been observing. I've been watching how they do things, and I think that honestly, I believe every black person in the world should study this one particular culture. It's the culture of the people that live in Thailand, the Thai people. They have a culture and they have things that they do that I feel like if we were to look at and approach life from that angle, I believe that, and there's something that was brought to my attention recently. I need to do a lot of research on this, but this, I don't know if you could see it right here. It's the Tulsa Real Estate Fund. And so I need to do a bit more research to find out exactly what this thing is. But from what it sounds like, it almost sounds exactly like what David was saying that we need to build, and it's happening like right now. It's a crowd fund that's happening in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and of course Tulsa also has another history that we have roots in. But yeah, I think that if we combine that with the study of Thai culture, I think we could create something amazing. And when I say Thai culture, it's a lot to get into, more than what we have, allotted for this time slot. But they really look out for each other. If anybody knows anything about like the people of Thailand, like they have each other's backs, like no matter what. And it's an amazing thing. And it's just an amazing. I highly encourage, just if you're watching this, you're not familiar with that culture, look it up, because it's amazing. That's
Okay.
not. I'm not saying it's perfect. They have everybody. Nobody's perfect in this world, but
Okay.
it's pretty amazing.
Point taken. Antoinette?
I'd say the first thing or the main thing that I would want to take from them, kind of like what my cousins were saying, or both of them, was history, a story. I think you already know that my plan with my son is to let him grow his locks. I've had his hair locked since he was 1 year old, since his first birthday. I want him to grow those locks for 10 years. And then I want him to start a process of going through a Black education called Black School. And I want him to learn his history, not just how Africans got to America, but also what happened predating the African Holocaust, and then what happened to where all did Black people go during the African Holocaust, and when were people freed, and how did their lives change after the African Holocaust. So I would want to know more of their individual histories, because there are so many different types of Black Brits. There's Black Brits whose families have been there since slavery. There's Black Brits whose families are just getting there. And there's stories to be told by both of them, in how to integrate, and how to integrate and still remain ourselves, how to define ourselves, definitely, and how to stand up against oppression in whatever way that they're doing it. One of the things that stuck with me in the video was she said that they're not getting shot by the police over in Britain, but they're getting beaten to death by the police, which is horrifying. It's scary to catch a bullet, but it's even scarier, scary to catch an ass whooping to death too. So I think that, there's enough shared. We need to recognize our shared history so that we can all become stronger because of it. That will, I think it will cause us to want to own our own things. It will give us the knowledge that we need and the surety in ourselves that we need to go and start these manufacturing and these shipping companies and these other type of companies that will allow us to stand up on our own. So if I was going to take anything from them, it would be that.
All right, and I'll second that. I think that they had a huge entrepreneurial spirit in Britain. Every Black British person that I was talking to, they had some type of business and they had some type of link back to the motherland. And I said, okay, well, this was meant to be. This is like serendipity 2.0. I'm here. I'm here to, just really experience London, but I met more Black people in London than I did white people. I received more love from the Black people in London than I did the white people in London. That's another story. I can probably do a separate video on that. But they are our bridge back to the motherland. And one, I want to see African Americans' hunger to get home to Africa grow. I want you to start watching good news about Africa, not bad news about Africa. I want you to see that China's in there right now. They're doing great things in Africa. But we can be in there as African Americans doing great things in Africa also. Africa right now, economies are growing at the GDP are growing at double-digit rates year over year. It's not what it used to be. It's not where it needs to be, but it's not what it used to be either. And there's a lot of good news stories in there, and you need to seek the good news stories out. Stop listening to all the bad bullshit. As far as Black British people, stop listening to the bad bullshit that you hear about African Americans, and know that there's a lot of African Americans here on the grind every day. We're working, and we want to rebrand ourselves and reimage ourselves also. We are your brothers. We are your sisters, right? And we are unique. Don't hunger to have a Black British culture. Hunger to have your African culture. let that British culture lay where it is, man. It is what it is. They have a lot of things to be ashamed of. You have a
It's
lot
bad
of,
enough we're all speaking English, right?
and we're all speaking English, right? So that's the beautiful part is they speak English and we speak English. So it's not like, it was a completely different dynamic when I was in Paris and I'm dealing with Black Parisians, right? It was a little bit more difficult because I don't speak French. You understand? So any closing comments from anybody? Any missed
I
shots?
started taking the I don't know if you're familiar with the Pimsleur language course, but they have one for Swahili. I started taking that. So
Right on, my
that's
brother.
interesting.
All right.
Okay.
Any other closing
Share it
shots?
when you're done. Don't make me buy my own, my brother.
Any alibis? All right. So if there are no alibis, I'm going to go ahead and we'll adjourn. Thank you all, panelists, Antoinette, Dr. Anderson, Esoteric, Brother Rod, myself, Lieutenant Louis 79. We're going to go ahead and sign off now. You guys hold the line. We'll still be, nobody's going to drop from the call and just stopping the broadcast.